Hello, friends, and welcome back to the Leading for Children podcast. I'm Julia Connolly, and I am really happy to be inviting you into today's episode, where my colleagues Jonathan and Shannon will be joined by a longtime friend and partner, Tanya Taylor. Together, these three have forged personal and professional relationships that have embodied humanity and a shared vision of excellence for all inside of our communities, children and adults alike. In this conversation, they'll trace the origins of their dynamic, revisiting foundational moments that have shaped the safe, supportive, and fueling spaces they've co-created for themselves and others. They'll invite us to consider the ways that we might integrate humanity-centered practices in our communities to care for the well-being of all inside and to create the ripples that influence thriving communities. So without further ado, I'll invite them to introduce themselves.
My name is Shannon Newman. I am grateful to serve in many roles in my life, including wife, mother, grandparent, and aunt. Professionally, I'm the Associate Director with Leading for Children, where I have the privilege of partnering with educators and leaders like Jonathan and Tanya.
Hi, I'm Jonathan Fribley. I am a grandparent, parent, gardener, hiker, live in Minnesota, so I'm also a snow shoveler and cross-country skier. Professionally, I was an early educator for many years, also worked with fathers, then an early childhood coach and consultant. Now I'm a senior program leader with Leading for Children, facilitating mutual learning conversations with early educators and others around the United States. I'm delighted to be here to talk with Tanya about our collaborative community in Marin County.
Hi, everyone. My name is Tanya Taylor, and I am the Director of the Early Childhood Department at Marin County Office of Education. I've worked in the field of early childhood for the past 35 plus years and am looking forward to continuing that work in the future. We've been partnering with Leading for Children for the past 6 years, and the Humanity First method is something that is embedded in everything that we do now, from our department meetings all the way into professional development for the workforce in our county.
We have the opportunity to be together in a fairly small group in our co-design meetings every month. And we always provide space in our meetings for some kind of settling, being present. But we seem to have evolved our own tool for that in that somehow we always end up beginning our interactions with some kind of laughter. And I was trying to recall, and nobody's telling jokes. I think just enjoying our stories with each other. Tony, do you have a sense of where that comes from?
I feel for me, it's that connection. It's a connecting way to be together. And like you said, we're always been in these small groups and it gets very intimate and it's a place of safety. I feel completely safe to be truly authentically who I am in our conversations and within our partnership co-design meetings. And for me, I know in my own life, laughter is a connector. It's a way I can connect with other people. And so I think, like you said, through those stories that we share, it brings us laughter. It brings us to a place of connecting.
For me, it's a bit like when you show up in a room and you see someone that you consider a loved one or a friend, and you show up and you haven't seen each other for a while. And you're like, oh, hi. And you just laugh and touch base about things that maybe, oh, what have you been doing and whatnot. And that's how it feels when we come together in these type of interactions. Is that first little bit is us excitedly going, hey, how are you? I haven't seen you for a minute. And then once we get that out, like children in a classroom that haven't seen each other all summer, then we go, oh, okay, now what are we here for? And let's pause and come together.
Really appreciating what you described, Tanya, where I think I heard you connect in joy and safety. And I don't know that's something I've thought about before, but that sense of safety does feel like such a powerful part of where I was going to say where we've ended up, but it seems like we got to a space like that fairly early on in our work. And I actually had to look back. It was 2021 when we started working together.
I know.
Yeah, yeah. And there's been this whole evolution in our work, both in terms of what we're doing together and also in our relationships. But it seems to me that sense of safety was created pretty early on. And I know I found myself pondering what happened to create that quickly and deeply?
Jonathan?
I did too. And I was also thinking back in maybe a little over 5 years when we first started coming together in this partnership. And I was trying to think, like, how did we make those connections so authentically and strongly? And what was happening in those first conversations that we had? And it's been a while. And I think it was that we all came from a place of wanting to do something really powerful for the adults that are working with children in our community. And so I think it started with that. We had something in common and we were able to, the skills that we were talking about with other adults. So we were practicing in that parallel sense, again, what we were also having conversations with the adults that we were working with. And so it helped us build a really strong relationship, I feel, that I think we really connected on that plane, so to speak, where we could really authentically be with each other, be honest, that we could take risks with each other. We could share really intimate things that were going on in our own lives and connect in other ways. And that just evolved over the years that we are now coming to these spaces where, like Shannon said, it's like we haven't seen each other a long time, even though we see each other fairly regularly. But it's like old friends getting together and just picking up where we left off, that it's no time has passed.
I also reflected on why is this partnership, I think, authentic and unique in the way that we show up and just the way that we're able and willing to communicate with one another. And I realized a bit in our LFC journeys, we've grown up together. That Jonathan had come on as a program facilitator, and then I came on and we were partnering with you all in Marin County, and that we learned these strategies and ways of mutual learning together. And I almost feel like now we're like, of course, we're not experts and we don't have it, but we're like, oh, we at least have some muscle memory around these strategies and how to show up. And it just confirms for me how important it is to have people around you that are having that like mind or wanting that same mission, having that same why that keeps them motivated.
That's really interesting. So the muscle memory, I remember one of the first conversations in co-design with Judy. I talked about muscle memory. When we had our first convening, it was really different for me to go through a mutual learning method process. And I talked about that this is something that because of trainings and things that I've been at, I'm going to have to work on my muscle memory. And it's just going to take practice of it over and over again. And so we've had 5 years growing up in that, like you said, and that muscle memory now, I think it plays a big part, that the mutual learning opportunities, that's part of the lens I use now. It's part of me that I take with me wherever I go. And I really think about, like, how could this interaction be different? How could it be stronger and better if I were to implement some of these strategies within that?
It's so much else powerful in what was just described. I'd like to hold up a few things and highlight or extend a bit. Tanya, you described that we all came from a place of wanting to do something powerful with adults. And what came to mind for me was a number of times when you spoke really clearly about wanting to support the Marin County team, everybody from directors to people doing childcare in their apartment, to support all of those folks in finding and using their voices, and your commitment to really supporting other people's agency just stood out for me. It seems like it's something that comes back around, that surfaces in so many conversations, and something that probably applies to just part of why our experiences flourish is that you also describe moments when people have done that. You tell stories that we wouldn't have access to otherwise, of this person went to this meeting and did these things. That helps us feel like we have some kind of a shared mission and impact. And I know that's powerful for me, and just you demonstrating how fully committed you are to that, doing something powerful with adults. I was also really struck by you describing being honest. And when I think about our partnership, I don't know if I can disentangle or if I should disentangle our professional partnership and our personal one. And professionally, there are layers that we have worked together in these kind of leadership roles. And in those roles, we have been open learning partners with each other. And I remember especially those first couple years when I think we were all discovering the depths and nuances of how people respond to and change and grow in these kinds of conversations and what makes it powerful for them and holding ourselves calm while people are working through things and that trust that we are trying to create something together and we will watch and be curious and think about it. And neither of us had to perform for each other. Neither of us had to put on a best face for each other. We could share both what was successful and what felt hard and what the questions were, and trust that the other organization and the other person would receive those in a spirit of cooperation, collaboration, so that we can be partners in growing. And it's certainly not always true in professional interactions that people can actually be honest and open with each other about what's happening inside their organization and how we don't have all the answers, because then we can create those together, both trust building and powerful for what we're doing. And the other thing I want to just share on that sense of honesty is, as I thought back to some of our earliest work together, Tanya, was a Tuesday group or something together
I
early
think
on?
so. Yes. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah. We were in the
okay.
together. Yes.
Yeah. And I just remember how here you were stepping in. You can't help but be a leader in those spaces. Everybody knows who you are. And also, you shared stories that showed you pausing, that showed you pondering, considering. I remember you telling about daughters and your niece and ways that let people know that you saw yourself not as somebody there to supervise or to have answers, but as somebody who was there for your own growth and in supporting others. And just your honesty and openness, I know it had an impact on how I thought about you, and it certainly did on that group. And then later on, I remember we used to do, I think the term we used was welcome conversations. And you and I got, I don't know, must have been at least half an hour or so to just hang together and talk about what matters to us
Yeah.
professionally and as people. And having that opportunity, finding some resonances personally and professionally. And also, there was this sense of this is somebody who,
Yeah, like it's a kindred spirit kind of thing, right? I think about that too, Jonathan, about those early days. I have worked in this community a long time. So a lot of people have known me and know who I am, and I have a relationship with them. And at the same time, we talk a little bit about should we be in these conversations? Because if we are people going to be hesitant to share, are they going to be hesitant to be their authentic selves? And I truly believe that I'm part of the community, right? That I'm growing alongside them. I'm not here to say one way's right or the other, that I'm the expert in anything at all, but that this was a place for us to grow together in community because we need for them to develop the agency, right? We need for them to articulate. We need for them to be a voice in the community and to really shine and rise above a lot of what's going on, to say that these are our children and we want to do the best for them. And if I came from a place of I'm here to supervise, that would have really, I think, destroyed really what we've created over these past 5 years. It would have been a completely different experience. And it's important for leaders, and I say leaders in a sense, we're all leaders in some way or the other, but also leaders who are there who are supervising others. It's important for them to be vulnerable, to show themselves as humans. I've worked in different organizations, and that is sometimes the place where when people are trying to create community within an organization, it becomes a barrier because they don't feel that they can be their authentic self, that they can be humans, that they can trust other people in the room. And I think what we've brought here to Marin, this opportunity for them to experience something differently and then to be brave and take that risk and try it within their own classroom or within their family. I practice the power of pause that we've talked about, right? I practice a lot of these things with my own children, with my brother and sister, because it truly is a place where we can come together and support each other and grow together. And it helps to strengthen our relationships in so many different ways. It helps me be a better parent or a better friend. So for me, it was an opportunity to grow professionally, but also personally too. And I think that has changed my relationship with others in the community as well, that I'm connecting in different ways.
I find myself thinking about is the privilege of doing this work and doing it together in two senses. One is, I think you described something that has been my experience too, is that when we work on creating professional communities where we are who we hope to be for children, the overlap with the rest of our lives is, I was going to say, just kind of obvious. Maybe that's not the right phrase for it. It's just the place to be, because then what we do from a practical standpoint, I suppose it becomes muscle memory. But more importantly, we don't live this divided life. And I think that word authentic gets used a lot. I don't need to almost do this code shifting to be in different spaces. And I mean, that's such a powerful part of trust. I think that that's had a real effect. I mean, you and others, some informal leadership and others, just people reaching that point that when you do that, then other people bigger reach for and is emotionally, I think, for some folks, pretty hard and risky, that over time, I think some people have stepped into trusting and being open in some ways that has changed conversations. And other people in that space have helped create that, oh, you can do this here. And I think for some folks, it's okay, this is a safe space to do this. And for other folks, it's like, oh, this is possible at all. This is not something I do anyplace else. But wow, look at what's happening here. I did a little poking around in some of my notes. And here's something that you shared in one meeting I ran across Tanya.
I can't wait.
Not magic, and everybody can do it. People are hungry to be seen and heard, and people want a space where there are norms of kindness, empathy, and respect. And that's only really possible when the people who get to define the norms, that's us, live into that.
Yeah, we have to lean into it. We have to live it. It has to become who we are. So this all grew out of that. There was a study done that we helped sponsor on the workforce here in our county. And what we saw was hard. It was hard to read the results of that study and to know that the early childhood workforce was working and living in places where they felt they had no agency, where they felt that they were being bullied, where they didn't feel like they could trust people within their classrooms, or they couldn't turn to their supervisor for fear of repercussions. And we were like, we have to do something to change this. There has to be something out there that we could bring to our community to change this. And it has been such a powerful thing to have these conversations and to have people who are assistants in the classroom all the way up to directors in programs and community advocates and liaisons for school districts, all coming together to have these conversations and to see people who were fearful of saying something out loud all of a sudden feel like they could share, that they were in a place where they could articulate their voice and that people were really listening to what they had to say and able to connect it with how other people were also experiencing their community or their world in early childhood. It was really powerful to see that happen.
I'm wondering if something that's related to what you described, Tanya, is in some of what people have been living with in the past, year and a half or so, when a lot of folks in some of the Marin communities have felt unwelcome due to circumstances well beyond Marin County. And people have clearly carried that. And I think that part of what we collectively arrived at was that people both needed space to make that pain visible and held, and then also space of hope and resilience. And I'm very aware of how people talked about that fear, that sense of not belonging, and were also then able to hold each other in that. And like your and my personal partnership didn't create that, but we had been working together for years to create a shared community where people could bring their hardest stuff. And in this really difficult time, I think the last few years have made a difference in what has been possible, what people have used our relationship for in the last year.
Yeah. It's comforting to come to these conversations because there is, again, that connection that we have with each other. It's a place where people feel heard and they feel like they belong. When I think of our mutual learning communities, I think of that this is a place where people belong. And that when people enter into those, that's the sense that they have, that this is theirs. And I think about some of the conversations we've had and how that just ripples out to the larger community and how that affects other teachers and other programs when they hear about this place where they belong and about the 5 commitments and about our 11 simple rules. And what does that look like in programs and how do we support that with each other and how do we connect that? I think I shared with you recently that one of the members of our group has created in her own program, as you enter into it, an outdoor space to pause and breathe. And it's for parents, for children, it's for the staff, that if they need to take a pause and breathe, and it's a beautiful, lovely space outdoors with greenery and plants, and there's a sign that says pause and breathe. So she's taken what has been really meaningful to her in our conversations and being in a mutual learning community and has taken that and said, what can I do for my community here? And I just think that's something that those parents and those children, as they enter, they see that every day. And a parent can take that moment. This was a hard morning. And before I go to work, I have a place where I can just sit and reflect a little bit before I get in my car and go on. To me, this is the power of what it is that through our partnership, we've been able to do in our community. That doesn't always have to be in a mutual learning community, but we can take those values and those characteristics and those strategies and put them into practice in many different ways that are going to have the same kind of impact on the adults and the children.
Hearing you talk about that, I'm thinking about the children's experience as they come in this area and it's okay. You can breathe here and the adults can breathe here. And that's all the adults, your family, right? And your teachers and these other people. And I found myself imagining what might be possible if children only saw people behaving in this different way, pausing and taking a breath, taking a moment before responding, being curious, cultivating their self-awareness before they enter into a conversation. How would our children be growing up, be developing rather than hearing us yell at one another? Or we know violence in the home is a huge thing right now. And something we know is true. Teachers are burned out. They're low on resources, both personally and professionally. And I'm just thinking, even that little moment of here's a space provided for you, and this is what it's for, how that can change the trajectory of those children and what's being modeled for them.
I find myself thinking about parallel process and
Me too.
pulse, really. Yeah, yeah. And I think early on, we committed to trying to have our interactions our relationship, the sort of leadership relationship, look like the way we hope the relationships between children and amongst children and adults will be? The same kind of valuing of each voice, the same respect, the same curiosity, the same care. And I think we've actually done pretty well at that. And when I think about, Tanya, you described a space that someone has set up. If we had laid out our objectives, that wouldn't have shown up as an objective, that people change their physical space in order to use some of these kinds of tools, right? And I know I find myself thinking about consequences, ripples that I guess if you pause and think about it, those would be things you'd look for, but I hadn't. And I'll just share one. Recently found myself working with some folks where I did not feel like I had the full trust of leadership. And I was not feeling confident that I could be open and honest as I worked with their team and looking over my shoulder. And I have never experienced that with Marin. You and before you, Carol, and of course, other people, Kelsey, and various people in leadership roles in Marin are in our learning partnerships. And I never find myself thinking I need to do anything different because leadership is watching, so to speak, right? That our job is to be with and facilitate people as we hope to. And if something requires a pause and reflection, we can do that at that time. And if there's something we need to talk about later, we will do that. Just that sense of trust that earlier on, Tanya, you described about how we have a shared vision or purpose with the adults, and that if there's something to visit about, we know we're part of the same whole. That, yeah.
Yeah.
I think what you're describing is the mutuality component that we try to encompass is that we're coming together mutually. We're not bringing something to teach or deliver, and you all aren't bringing something to tell us how to be, right? We're mutually showing up together. So I think whenever you embrace that and you show up to these conversations and interactions, there's an openness to be able to say, "Oh, I don't really know," and that be okay. And I'm thinking back, Tanya, I remember we were in a conversation together in a convening, and I was just feeling, I'm going to be honest, real yucky. And I don't know if you remember this, but you picked up on it and sent me a message and was like, "Hey, do you want me to do XYZ?" And I was like, "Oh gosh, yes, please." You're not an LFC team member, right? You're technically not one of our facilitators, but even outside of us being in a co-design, being in a different type of interaction together, I knew, like, without a doubt, I could trust you to help carry me through that moment. And I think that speaks to just how much we have in tandem been willing to walk together to be like, I've got it this time, and how we have just continued to be that support or encouragement or just whatever we needed in this partnership as we were moving along.
So between what you and Jonathan both just said, I think so when we think about children and them watching adults doing this, watching them work hand in hand to take care of each other, to step in when you see someone needing a little extra support, to say that it's okay that, you know what, I was wrong or this isn't going well. What would our world look like if that was the experience for all children to see adults behave in this way with each other? Because children are watching, they're learning from us. They know when we're burnt out and tired, we're bringing that right into their world, and it affects who they are in their classrooms and in their families. It could be really hurtful. So to be and watch be in classrooms where you see a lot of adults in pain, and you know that the children are experiencing that pain also because the adults around them are able to bring that joy. They haven't been in a place where they can have some healing around what's going on. So I think if children were watching adults in a healthy way, what would be possible for our communities?
feels like they're just all different levels there. At some very basic level, the stress that children experience when adults are stressed at something as basic as cortisol levels. But then beyond that, we see children not only use the language we use, but use the voice tone and facial expressions and all of that. And I just wonder if we have an impact on children's vision for what's possible. And I know when I was a preschool teacher, children come in from all kinds of experiences, and sometimes children came in carrying a lot, and that wasn't always going to change. I always had that sense that one of the things we could do is we could give that child a glimpse that there are other possibilities. It's who we are and how we are as adults that make that difference. And I can't just put it on in my classroom. And I don't think there are a lot of adults that have the strength to be that best person right here when working with children if they don't also experience that elsewhere. It just takes too much energy. We need to find ways to be sustained.
I think about also children watching us go through that process as well. Of like, this was a hard morning. I woke up, it was a hard morning. And for them to know that adults have hard mornings too, right? And that we can work through that. There are things that we can do to help us get better and feel better throughout the day. And to see adults go through that process also, that there are hard things that happen. There are times that I'm going to feel sad or frustrated. And this is what I do to get through those times in healthy ways. Jenna, you were about to say something.
Yes, but now what you said made me think of something else. So I'm just going to. I'm thinking now about the parallel process again, because what you're describing is a little bit like leadership, right? Like leadership, we don't have to show up this way and we don't have to apologize or we don't have to do this, right? And then the adults show up with the children and they're like, oh, I don't have to apologize and I don't have to necessarily watch my actions all the time and this and that. But then the children show up and they are required, right? We hold them to quite a high standard for them to maybe have been on us for 12 months or something. Yes. Flop screaming inside and, this and that. And when I was hearing you talk, I thought, yes, that's it though, right? If the leadership models how we can show up, then now we can show up for children in a different way. And then all of us humans are just showing up, right? And the word I thought was kind. And then I thought, no, because people think kind means nice. And that's not exactly what we mean. I think we mean to show up authentically and bravely and respectfully.
Yes, bravely, right? Yes. Yeah, that's a strong word. And leaders have to be brave. They have to be brave to be vulnerable. I've been really fortunate that I've had people in my life who have been my supervisor or somebody who is working alongside me that have been able to model that for me. Because there's also a lot of people in my life who aren't vulnerable, that aren't authentic, that don't allow me to be brave. But because I have had some very strong people in my life who have really supported me in risk taking and being brave, I can do it. But think about children, and if there's people in their lives who help them take risk and help them be brave in safe and healthy ways, anything's possible.
I don't know if you remember saying, Tanya, or not. I think part of what happens in our co-designs is that we practice doing little things for an hour that helps build just that sense of, oh, this is a way I can walk through my day, partly developing the muscle memory and partly just developing self-awareness that this is how I want to be. And I can carry that to other places. And so there are certainly moments for bravery. And then there are also just the more mundane daily interactions that can become less mundane and more valuable when we treat them that way.
There's definitely a difference in the way that we show up when we show up in mutual learning spaces than how maybe other teams and organizations show up. A family member was just recently talking about a meeting and he said, I don't even know what that means. I don't even know what this meeting is for and what it means and why we're going. And I thought, oh goodness, they need a predictable structure, right? That way people feel safe whenever they show up because they know what to expect. They know the topic and they know this agenda is coming. And every time they're going to have this kind of method and way of being when they show up together. And they don't. And I got to hear in real time how that impacts people whenever they're expected to show up with one another. That whenever we show up in spaces and we truly don't know what to expect, the anxiety and kind of the unwellness that starts to spur in a body coming up to that. And it made me think about just some of our strategies, like you mentioned, Jonathan, even for the mundane, just knowing that we're going to show up together and we're going to do certain things once we get in that space makes it not feel so mundane, because we're able to say, we're going to say hi to each other, and then we're going to take a breath and set our intention. And we know that we're going to connect. And there's just a predictability there that offers that safety and space to show up as your true self. I think it starts with remembering that everybody enters a space carrying something. We may not be able to see it and we may never know about it, but we always carry our context, our experiences, our responsibilities, even our biases, right, with us into conversations and spaces. And I think it's important to remember that's everyone. And when we're creating a mutual learning space, it's inviting them in as they are.
I'm also thinking, I was thinking something similar. It's just meeting people where they're at. Like you said, Shannon, everybody is showing up with something. And even if we have a relationship with them, we may not know what went on earlier in the day that may be impacting how they're showing up in our mutual learning communities. And so I think some of the advice I might offer is that when people are showing up in a place where for many of them, this was a brand new idea, mutual learning communities, and being in a place where we're connecting with each other in a different way than they've ever experienced before. And part of the success of it is, I think, that of building that trust where people could be authentically open and honest with each other and listen respectively and really create that meaningful community, was that they knew when we said we were going to do something, we were going to do it, right? So if they shared something, this was our space. It wasn't something that was shared outside with other people. So if an assistant said something, we didn't go to their supervisor and share that information. So that this really was a place where they knew they could trust us because we modeled for them what that trust looked like. And I think that's really important. And we do that not just in the mutual learning spaces, but in our larger community spaces as well, that they've seen how we interact with them and what they share with us and how we hold that close to us with each other.
Yeah, that really speaks to me. I'm thinking about when we take the risk of being open and trusting, it calls the other person into that space. And I think part of what's happened in our partnership has been that outside the groups, the learning circles with the wider Marine staff, that we've had that experience with each other in the co-designs and so on, and that has helped us take that elsewhere. I'm circling back around to what I'd shared that you offered before, Tanya. It's not magic and everybody can do it. Right?
Yeah. And I think also another reason for success in our community as well is that we're not just practicing when we are in our meetings that happen once or twice a month, that this is something that myself and the rest of the department here, that we practice this with each other. We practice this in our own department meetings. We practice it in other professional learning opportunities that we provide. So it's something that we're always practicing. And I think that also is helpful because it builds that muscle memory a little bit. It becomes like this is just a part of who we are. And we can see that it's having a really positive effect on the community around us. And we see people practicing it in their own communities, which has been really exciting to see them taking their own muscle memory and what they are getting out of our mutual learning conversations and saying, I can go into this other community now and do something as well.
And that's our episode, friends. As you can tell, this conversation was based on such a rich history of care and respect and authenticity between three wonderful humans. We're glad you came along as they explored the impacts of healthy partnerships and hope it inspires you to think about the ways that you model kindness, empathy, and respect and create safe spaces for all to show up with their whole humanity first. We invite you to subscribe to the Leading for Children podcast on your favorite streaming platform, and you can always visit leadingforchildren.org to sign up for our newsletters and explore ways to get involved. Thank you for your commitment to shaping thriving communities for children. Wishing you optimism. Till next time.